Hello and welcome to your cymbal basics video. I'd love to share what I know and some of the things that I teach when I'm working with marching cymbal lines. Every group does things a little bit differently, and so there's things like the cymbal grip, how the strap should be adjusted. All of those things are kind of up for debate. I mean, pretty much all of this is, but that can be something that maybe your specific group will have guidance on. Basically speaking, marching cymbal grip, you start by coming through the strap like this and then sort of wrapping your thumb around the strap to where you have control over the cymbal and the bell, and it looks like that from the back. So you can maneuver all you want, and that's going to be the same for both hands. Ideally, there should be just a little bit of play, unless you're going to be doing a lot of, sort of flip visuals. But basically speaking, you should be able to have control without cutting off circulation to the big parts of your hand. The first position that I like to talk about is typically called the set position. I think anywhere you go, you might find a different name for it. But basically, it's going to look about the same. So for a set position, you're going to have the cymbals up, and I think usually it's right hand on top or right cymbal on top. So even if you're left-handed, your left hand's really going to be sort of the support cymbal. You're going to bring the cymbals up. You're going to have them out from your body for, safety reasons mostly, so you don't hit your body unnecessarily when you're performing these different techniques. But you're going to have your cymbals at an angle, and again, this is something that can be sort of adjusted as need be. I go for maybe a 45, maybe a little bit flatter than a 45, but the main important thing for set is that your cymbals are going to be out away from your body. Once you have that in place, you're in pretty good shape. Cool. The first playing technique I like to talk about is a crash, just a normal crash, how you would see it notated sort of in the middle of the staff for a unison crash, or on any of the split lines for a split. I like to work with a 3-step crash whenever possible. It's definitely not always possible, but basically we have, like I said, 3 steps. So if we're in our set position, we have our prep, right? We separate the cymbals a little bit. You're going to bring your right arm back. You're going to angle the right cymbal just a little bit down towards the other one. We obviously don't want any sort of strange angle that way, but we don't want them to hit like this either. It's going to feel like you're taking the edge of the cymbal through the middle of the other one. All right, so that's our prep. The second step is obviously the crash. All right, so we crash all the way through, prep, crash. We reload. We go back to our set position. All right, everything we do really should have a count attached to it. The big, really experienced and almost professional groups, pretty much everything they do has a count to it. Even if it looks like they're going from place to place in sort of a flowy motion, they have checkpoints at least. All in all, that is prep, through, reload. That's the basics of our 3-step crash, and we're going to use that in a lot of different ways as we explore these other techniques. Cool. Once we have our 3-step crash set up going, and we can pretty much get our crashes in time, we want to look at our first technique. Past that, it's going to be our crash choke. Depending on the notation, the crash choke could be super short, it could be super long, but the basic idea is that we're cutting off the sound with our body. We're using our big muscle groups in our abdomen and sometimes our sides to bring that crash to a choke. Right, so let's say that we have our normal crash here. This is one way, and this is the way I usually start folks out on a crash choke. So we have our prep. Okay. The angles can differentiate a lot depending on your needs, but basically you're going to bring the cymbals into your abdomen. Okay, you'll want to be flexing your core here, just because you don't want to actually hit yourself, and you don't want to bring it in with such force that you're going to be injured. You don't want to wind yourself. But if we have a crash and you bring both plates into you, that sound is going to stop pretty quick, right? If you want a shorter choke, you just shorten the distance. Or you can bring both cymbals to your sides. So you can use either of those choke techniques depending on what the music calls for, what the visual moment calls for. But those are two really quick ways to stop that sound really fast and have control over the length of your crashes. Sweet. Another basic technique that we use all the time is called the hi-hat. Then there's sort of a variation of it called the crunch, and I'll kind of show you how both of those work. Right, for a hi-hat, we're going to start in our set position. We're going to actually bring both cymbals into our abdomen again. We're going to really sort of push in. Again, not to the point where it's uncomfortable, but if you're flexing your abs, you should feel a little bit of pushback. And this is definitely going to be something that you're going to need to build up to your max effectiveness. But we come from our set position where we have a little bit of an angle. Okay, we're actually going to flatten the cymbals out. Right? What you can really do is raise your top elbow. This definitely can be done with our left hand on top as well for purposes of demonstration and for most of the passages that that you'll be covering as a young or inexperienced cymbal player is going to probably be right hand on top. Cool. So just like a hi-hat on a drum set, it's two cymbals coming together. That's what's making the sound, as everything that we do here. But we're using sort of our hands as the rod on the hi-hat stand. So we're going to control when and where the cymbals go, basically just straight up and down. So hi-hats are usually something like quarter notes, maybe eighth notes, but you're going to see some kind of pattern like this. Okay? They're going to be very dry. It's going to sound like a click or something that's not quite as obtrusive in the sound as a normal crash or any of our sizzle techniques. It's just really mostly going to be to keep time. Right? And you can do dynamics, piano, mezzo forte, forte for some reason. Right? You have a lot of control because all you're doing is moving the right cymbal. You're going to keep your left hand and your left cymbal as close to flat and parallel to the ground as you can. All right. So that's our hi-hat. Let's take a look very briefly at the crunch. You'll also see that notated. It's kind of in between a normal crash and a hi-hat. The idea is you might be sitting at set, okay, and you're going to bring the cymbal up, and unlike a sizzle, which you'll see in just a bit, you're going to get a very, very short sound, and there's not going to be any extra vibration. So you're just going to push the cymbals into each other, right, and it sounds like a crunch. It's not a crash, right? It's not going to keep ringing. And it's not a hi-hat where we have the cymbals against us. We're really pushing our hands together through the cymbals. Right? This can be very aggressive. You can definitely do low dynamic crunches, but they're mainly meant to accent things. Okay? Once they come together, you push your arms in and see if you can get that sound basically as short and controlled as possible. And that is our crunch. Right on. So the next concept I like to cover is a new position, right? So we have our set position, which is down here still in front of us. The next position is called A position or high A position. And basically you take the set position that you have out front and you're going to bring both cymbals up. You're going to extend your arms. And again, this is one of those things, depends on the needs. You can have the right cymbal over, which is usually what I teach by default. And we have, it's sort of an A, but it's sort of not really. It's just kind of what we call it. You can technically have A down here. You usually don't see it. Usually you see it as the high A version, but sometimes we just call it A. The reason we might come up to A position would be for a visual moment, visual contribution. That's a lot easier if your cymbals are higher. If we have a flash or something up high, we can come back here and still play our music. lot of different things that we can do with it. The main technique that we're going to use in the A position is going to be called our tap. Right? So let's say we have our A. We're going to take the right cymbal and sort of use it like a drumstick. So we're going to play the edge of the cymbal versus pretty much still the edge of the cymbal. So that's the basis of a tap. It's a nice thin sound. It has a lot of wash to it, but it's very versatile and something that we can use. You know, we can have unison taps if we want to actually hear the sound, or if we just want to kind of keep time. That's a great way to do it. The next technique that we would sort of extend from that is going to be our tap choke. Right? So if we find ourselves in our A position and we play a tap, we're going to bring it all the way down to our pits. Okay? This is not something you want to come straight in, because even if you're really accurate and you happen to stop, like, you know, peck height, you just run too much of a risk. So you're gonna bring that tap choke down, all the way down to where your thumbs are almost in your pits. Okay? Tap choke. Right? You can play it as the same technique. But a lot of times the tap choke will come sort of at the end of a phrase. You might have an extra prep there. So you get a nice, almost like a rim shot. And that's going to be our tap choke. Cool. The next way we might be able to use our A position is a technique called a zing. Or it might be called a scrape. It just kind of depends, like I said, on where you're at. And we can do this on the way up to A position or after we're already there. So let's say that we wanted to come from a set position and we wanted to zing up to an A. As we're moving up, we're going to put the edge of the cymbal in the other cymbal and we're going to push them together. Hear that nice scrape sound. What's cool about that, both cymbals ring, right? Okay, so that's if we wanted to come from set up to A position. And you'll usually see those notated with a little slash through the note head to signify that that's supposed to be a zing. All right, so the next position that we would learn is very similar, and it's kind of an extension, I guess, of the A position. So we might have, for up here, we're still out in front of our body, we've got our cymbal sort of offset. If we wanted to switch to a port position, we're going to have our cymbals up here, and they're going to be basically parallel. Right? There's a couple of different techniques that we can use port position for. You'll often see it notated as a port crash, and that's going to be a similar to our three-step crash that we had in our normal set position. It's going to sound a little different, and it's definitely going to look different. Cool. So let's say that we're up in port. There can be, this is usually more of a visual moment. So if we wanted to have a port crash, we might bring the cymbals apart. And we're still going to try to aim for like a flam, like an edge-to-edge thing, but both cymbals are going to be moving here. Cool, so you'll notice that after the cymbals come together, we let them go all the way through the motion, and then we bring them back to that port position, usually. If we just have port, we stay in port, all right? So all the way up. So that is our port position and our port crashes. We can also have a port sizzle, and I'll show you sizzles in port and then in our normal set position as well. So let's say that we're up here. If we want to sizzle, we just sort of let the cymbals stay together and let them vibrate against one another. You'll see me also, just to sort of exaggerate, you don't always have to do this, but you'll see me bring my fingers up and where the cymbal, the weight of the cymbal is sort of resting on the strap and on my palm, all right, at the heel of the hand. So we're up in port. Let's say we want to do a sizzle. And then when you want to stop the sizzle, you just sort of put your hands on there, on the bell, and you can push them together. Or you can put your hands on the cymbal and bring them apart if you want an even more subtle ending. So that's our port sizzle. We can also use the sizzle technique in our set position. Okay, so let's say we wanted to sizzle here. Instead of having a 3-step crash and having our prep be down, you can kind of lay the cymbal where the bottom edge sort of makes contact first. And it's the same principle. You have control over when the cymbals stop vibrating together, but you just sort of hold them and suspend them. Or you can bring them apart. Depending on the sound you're looking for, but once you develop the nuance for that sizzle, you can have a sizzle of pretty much any length that you want. Cool. So the last technique I like to talk about is sort of an extension of our sizzle. It's what we call a fusion. Some music will call it a sizz suck or a sizzle suck. I prefer fusion. I think it's just it's a neater term, and you'll see it notated kind of like this in cymbal music. So fusion, we start with a sizzle, but we change the angle just a little bit. It's more like our 3-step crash. So we might have a prep, and we're going to quickly, in the through phase, we're going to bring it back down into set with the cymbals together. So it might look like this. All right, and again, you saw my fingers pop up. That's just so I know that at least one cymbal is going to be able to vibrate freely. You can also do it with your fingers together against the cymbal. This depends on what kind of sound you're looking for. This is a super popular one. It's probably one of the first techniques you learn. But since it has a little bit of nuance to it, I sort of put it towards the end of this, because once you really nail a sizzle, then you'll be able to get fusions with a lot more control and nuance, we'll say. Cool. You can also do a port fusion. All right, let's say we're up here. Instead of this angle, where we're going to go through in our normal crash position and bring it back, we're going to have it up here. You can kind of think of it as going up through and then bringing it back down to stop the sound. Normally, if a fusion is notated, it'll show you where the note is supposed to end, and it's usually very fast, more quick than a normal sizzle would be. Cool. Those are our basic techniques and some of our different forms that we use. I have actually put together a small etude to kind of show some of these off. This should be like anything in music while we're learning it, should be put to a metronome. You should be, thinking about timing as the main thing that we're looking for. Such a visual and such a washy, loud instrument, it really has to be exactly where we need it to be in time every single time. There's kind of nothing worse for an impact than a crash that's a 16th note early or a 16th note late, or the wrong technique or the wrong prep. And also, if we're in marching band and we're thinking that we're going to play a visual instrument like the marching cymbals, we want to have a count to everything. So we're going to be very precise, we're going to be very diligent, and we're going to sort of front load that effort to where all we have to do is put the energy in the front of the exercise or the passage of music, and we'll be in really great shape.